All right, what's up, nerds? All right, so here we go. Everybody say hey to Caleb
Hey Caleb.
and Bethany
Hey Bethany.
and Lorelai
And Lorelai.
and Lydia.
And Lydia.
Miss you guys. Miss y'all so much. All right, so this was what we did yesterday. Let me pray really quick and then we'll get going. Father, thank you for my students. Thank you that they're here this morning. I pray that you would just bless their day, whatever's going to be in it, whatever's not going to be in it. That they would just have an open valve to understanding and feeling the fact that you are protecting them, not only with the things that they have in front of them and that they are doing. Sometimes it's the things that they have to do that they don't want to do, but it's keeping them focused on something. It's keeping them in a certain realm of thought and feeling, and you are protecting them. There's something that you're keeping them from that they are not going through, they're not doing, that you didn't want them to have to do. You have them doing something else. It could be mathematical or scientific or mythological or something like that. This is what you have them contemplating, and you're in it. So I just pray that you would take it and use it, bless it, whether my teaching be insufficient, my slides be lame. You are not, and you're in it. So you can transform all things. You metamorphosize all things for good. All right, in precious name, amen. All right. Foster read my book up, and I'm really sad. All right. I was wondering. So here we go. Let me get this here. All right. Okay, so this was what we ended with yesterday. We had the Hercules at the Crossroads story, which is a super, super straight up story. It's one of the most straight up myths you're ever going to read or think about. He's just walking along the road. The road splits in two. We've got this modest and simple woman on one side, and then a red-dressed, pretty make-upped woman on the other. One's promising that if he goes this way, he'll encounter the most unbelievable blessing and ease and comfort throughout the rest of his life. And the other one is promising a path of difficulty and hardship, but says at the end, this is the only way to actually become great, is by walking the path of difficulty and hardship. And then the woman on the left side, the evil one, the wicked one, she starts to talk again. And the way that the myth even talks about it is that talks about her lips, the way her lips look, and the way that her tongue sounds. But he covers up her mouth, and then he goes back towards the woman who promises difficulty and hardship. So in Proverbs, I don't know if y'all have heard this before, but it's some of the most common metaphor that Solomon uses and the other proverbial writers use are the women that you're around. And the woman on the right, the simple woman, is known as wisdom in Proverbs. And then the woman on the left, she has many, many names, but she looks and is described by the Proverbs writer as exactly like her on the left. So it's pretty interesting, man. Very, very interesting. But this was a moment that changed Hercules' life. We talked about it in a kind of weird little miniature way yesterday, just about the day-to-day here at school. But the grand idea of the Hercules at the Crossroads story is that there are moments where you can realize things that are extremely real about life, and you know them in the moment. You know them mind, body, and soul. You realize them to be absolutely true about either an event that took place in your life or something that you finally understood about reality in general, whether it be a personality thing, a religious thing, a relationship thing, maybe an inevitable thing, something that you know is going to happen. You just realize that it's never going to stop. Like for me, I remember I was sitting in a Bob Evans one day. I just loaded up my plate with a bunch of mashed potatoes, sitting next to my dad. And I was like 6 years old, dude, and I just realized my dad's going to die. Like one day, my dad's going to die. And I started like crying in Bob Evans, dude. Like, have y'all had moments like that? Okay, and that really was like a moment for like the rest of my life where I just like sat there and I was just like, that's my dad. Like, I'm only ever gonna have one dad. Like, that was what, like, that's like I know that might feel like a weird example, but like, what I do with that understanding about this is my one and only real, like, true biological dad, like, that's gonna change the rest of my life. I realized that at like 6 years old, dude. I have like the journal entry where I wrote about it too. Yeah, it's crazy. It's those kind of moments that are like really, really significant. And then, I mean, obviously y'all heard my like story in chapel the other day. there was just a moment where like something became like insanely clear to me, in a moment where I did not want to address it, did not think it at all possible to actually like go this way. I'd been going the other way my entire life and it felt great. And then all of a sudden it was just like, it's either right now or never. That's like how it really felt. And I never meant to even think about it that way. Something just happened where it was just sitting right on me like that. And I know now that it was the Holy Spirit just telling me, I don't want this for you. I know you feel like it's the right way. And then something just sat on me in that moment that I never thought possible. And I somehow started walking with the woman on the right. And it changed my life. And it's been the hardest thing ever. It's truly just the hardest thing ever. And so that's this story of Hercules at the crossroads. You can even see in this version of the story, you have this woman kind of like touching all over him. And then this one is actually resembling who? Oh, yeah, very good. So that's not who was actually in the story, but this Renaissance painter deemed that that's the only way to truly resemble Lady Wisdom, which is pretty cool. So this is what sets up the rest of Hercules' life. All right, so this is the story that that kicks it into gear. All right, the decision. Let me go back just for 1 second. When I say sets up the rest of his life, it's sort of like how the book described it that I read from yesterday. He is such a douchebag. Even though he chose to walk with the lady of difficulty, the lady of hardship, but the lady towards greatness, even though he made that choice early on in his life, in his young years, he continued to be absolutely awful, time and time and time and time again. But that decision changed his life forever. Because once you go that way and you realize things this way, and you say, I do deem this right, this way, you can't go back. Your mind and your spirit, your heart, your memory will not let you go back. It's like when alcoholics talk about once they start going to meetings, and like maybe they make it through like step 1 or step 2, when they relapse after that, alcohol tastes different. The drunkenness feels different. And they don't feel the same left side red dress woman effects of it again. Because they know where it's taking them. They know where that path goes now. And that's why I know we talked about it yesterday, and just like the difficulty of school. None of you guys are like alcoholics yet, I don't think. None of y'all have like drug addictions yet. Maybe you have other kinds of addiction and stuff like that. But there is this feeling, especially in the world today, it's like you can keep walking whichever way you want. All roads lead to the exact same place, and that's just dead wrong. There are moments where you do realize that there's something in your life that is taking you down that path. And there's a decision that can be made at any point to go down the other way. But you can't just keep walking that same way and think it's going to take you to the greatness place, to the place where your life's actually going to change. You have to actively turn away and face something else. And once you do and you turn back, it's just not the same. And he tried to turn back many, many times. He tried to do awful things to go and give himself his own greatness, do things for himself again and again and again. But it eventually all led back. He kept on going down that hard path for others. All right, so anyways, this is the one story that kind of introduces that. All right, so he had already done this thing where he decided that his life was going to go towards greatness and hardship. And not long after that, he was punished with, this is a weird way to put this, humility. So Hera, long story short, had somehow gotten into the bloodline of marriages to where Hercules was not going to be king. And if you guys have ever thought about that, it's like, that's interesting. Hercules is really, I've never heard of a Hercules being a king. That's true. He was never allowed to be king. Why would Hera mess with him again? Let's just talk about that for a second. Why would Hera mess with him? Yeah. He's the product of, what's up, y'all? You're giving it to me?
I am.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
It's electric. Oh, thank you. Hera, the name Hercules is actually in the Greek Heracles, which means the glory of Hera. So they named him something that even offends her, like every time she hears his name. That's what Hercules means, the glory of Hera, the joy of Hera. Yikes. So she will do whatever it takes to make sure that he cannot have the authority that he probably feels like he needs to have. Because as I have kind of explained, this dude is the best at everything. Not just, strong fighting and stuff like that, but he's a musician, he's all kinds of stuff. And so she connives, manipulates the bloodline of a bunch of people so that this dude, Eurystheus, he becomes the king of Mycenae. Now, I should have put that up there because this is going to come into play when we do start talking about Troy. Mycenae is one of the main areas of Hellas, of the Hellas people, that's going to be a player in the Trojan War. So Hercules is not going to be the king of Mycenae. A dude named Eurystheus somehow got the bloodline position over him. And so they tell Hercules that. They say, Hercules, you need to show Eurystheus that you are subordinate to him. And that's like the worst thing you could ever say to Hercules. Hercules answered a nobody kind of thing. All right? And so, like I said, he chose the path of difficulty. And the very first thing that he's challenged with, at least in the way I'm just going to present it to you like this, is you have to lay down your pride. And that he was probably thinking when he chose this path with this woman on the right, he was probably thinking like, oh, I got to go fight giants next, don't I? I got to go fight like a sea monster or something. That's probably what you meant by difficulty. And this is the first thing. I just love it. I love it so much. Actually, somebody's going to be king over you. And it makes him go crazy. And Hera feeds off of his fury so much that it actually calls the Furies up to him from Hades. Do y'all remember that story of Hera going down, Juno going down and grabbing them? She doesn't even really have to. He gets so angry that he starts to think about killing his family. And do y'all remember how that's a taboo in the ancient world, killing members of your family? Which, yeah, it's like the most common story we talk about. It calls the Furies up, and they actually plague him with frenzy, which is like the divine form of anger, to the point that he starts to kill his wife. And then he kills his children. So some stories say that he went mad on his own, but the common theme of the majority of them is that he was divinely enraged. And he started to see some of them as like animals, just like that story that we read in Ovid before. Lion cubs, started to see them as different animals. Yeah, he saw them as other things. So what eventually happened was he had to go, and he found out from the Oracle of Delphi first. He said, this is your future. You are prophesied to be a servant of the king. And so that got Hercules big time. He hated that. And so what happens then is he has to go back to the Oracle of Delphi and basically ask for forgiveness from the gods, because that's, the Oracle of Delphi is like one of the perfect examples of going and talking to the gods directly. And they say, you have to go and make amends for this. You killed your own family and you denied servitude to the king. So you have to go and make amends for what you've done. And that's where we get the 12 labors of Hercules. You have to do these 12 things. All right, and you have to do them all for the king. Every single one of these things that you're going to accomplish are all things that are going to benefit the king. All right, so this is like the Hercules story other than number 2. Number 1 and number 2 are really like the ones everybody knows about. All right, so number 1 is the Nemean lion. All right, and it's just a fun story of, you could even go in and read him. It's really cool. He like goes into this town where the Nemean lion's like destroying everything, and he like goes in and he tells like everybody, get inside. Like, watch out, he's a big lion. And he goes and he pulls up with his like bow and arrow. He thinks he's like ready to go. He's like totally set. He's gonna kill this thing, and he like shoots it. And just like the Caledonian boar hunt, it just bounces like right off. No way, it's piercing the Nemean lion's skin. Nothing can pierce the skin of the Nemean lion. And so eventually he realizes that he has to wrestle it, and he has to choke the life out of it while bashing its head in with his club. So that's when his club becomes like his item. But not only is the club now his item, he then decides, I want something to remember this victory by. And he tries to cut the skin off, but he can't, because remember, nothing can cut the skin off the Nemean lion. How is he going to get the Nemean lion's skin off of the Nemean lion? Can y'all solve that riddle? This is a fun little riddle that he solved.
Does he gut it?
Uses its teeth for claw.
Very good. He uses its own claws to cut off the skin. Heck yeah, dog. So, very good. I love that. He uses its own weapons to do it. So now you see him, from that point on, now you're going to see him most of the time with the Nemean lion's skin on. He like uses it as this like cuirass, and eventually he turned it into a helmet and stuff like that. So the number 2 thing that he does is he fights the Hydra. This is the fun story. It's like the 7-headed snake that changes into a 100-headed snake, depending on which story you're reading. But its thing is that if you cut off one of its heads, 2 more grow in its place. And then, like I told you guys yesterday, what's like the agricultural read on this story?
Like crops.
Yeah, this is man inventing irrigation, how to control the wily nature of rivers. So that's a cool way to take it, but it's also just a rad story. He's just a stud. The next thing is this one. There are only what? Oh, sorry. He cuts off. Thank you. He cuts off the heads, and he gets the torch of his little partner that he has with him, and he brands the heads shut. So he cuts them off and then sears them closed. And then he eventually does kill it, and that's his, conquering of the Hydra. But then he's like, you know what? I want something to remember it by, because that's sort of like the theme here. Conquer it and then have it for my own usage. And he takes his arrows, and he cuts the body in half, and he dips the arrows into its blood. And so the arrows are like the most powerful arrows ever. So it's like whenever you in a video game, you beat a boss and then you get like a new weapon or something like that. That's what the Hercules story is. It's the best. What's up?
Those are the arrows that he shot Nessus with.
Yeah, very good. And that's what soaked his blood. Yeah. So when the blood was soaking with that poison and then it got on the cloak, he gave it to and it's going to end up being his death. So you can read into that as much as you want. It's pretty exciting.
Do you have to refresh your brain on these stories, or you just know them?
Most of them I just know, which is crazy.
So awesome.
But this book and another book that I have, I definitely like to get all the reads, because I forget different retellings of the stories.
The stories you know. I know there's probably so many more. That's so
I
crazy.
really appreciate you saying that. It was really, really sweet. But every time I talk about this stuff, it's like, oh man, I never thought about it that way. Which is the cool thing about myths, because I've been reading these myths since I was like 6 years old. And every time I teach them or talk to you guys about them, or I make a PowerPoint out of them, I'm like, oh, that's why I love it, dude. All right, so this is the third one. Seems much more chill. Look at how happy this little guy is. I think that's hilarious. His little face. He's just like, woo. But these are the Carnithian deer, and there are only 5 of them. Who do you think they're sacred to?
Diana.
Yeah. What'd you say? Nice. Very good. That's right. All right, so good. Yeah, Diana, Artemis. So he has to go out and grab one of these things. They're like the fastest deer in the world, and their horns are gold and stuff like that. And he has to go all the way to Arcadia for doing that. And of course, you guys know that Artemis was super stoked about all that jazz, dude. So she tries to take it out on him. But then he says this to her. He says, "Great goddess, it was not idle sport which prompted me to do this, but sheer necessity. For how else could I fulfill the wish of Eurystheus?" And so then she stood there, dumbfounded, and her anger was calmed. So it's a weird little thing. And when I didn't think about it, like I was just saying, I didn't ever think about this before. But because of the way that we talked about the Actaeon story, it made like more sense about like why that's significant. Y'all know from previous stories of Artemis how freaking sensitive she is when you mess with her nature. You mess with her own holiness, the holiness of her own creation, or her woods and stuff like that. And she does not relent. So for him to say something like this doesn't just show, that he's just like a stud, don't mess with me. It shows that he is like a wise man. I know that it might feel like I'm like reaching on this, but if he can basically argue Artemis out of killing him, I would say that's pretty significant. Because all the other stories where people mess with her stuff, she never relents. So he speaks like 2 words, and for that to be something that calmed her down, that's pretty impressive. All right, the next one, this is going to feel pretty similar as well. This is the Erymanthian boar. All right, it's not the Chaldean boar, but he has to go and take out the Erymanthian boar. I'm just going to go quickly because whatever. And then he has to do, this is one of 2 of these. He has to clean out these stables. All right, this one, let me go ahead and I'll cover a little bit of this. But okay, so he's basically just told, you have 1 day to do this. And the king that he promised to do this for, he just literally was like, oh man, I get to like kill this guy. If I don't, I'll get literally everything from him if he doesn't do this. There's no way anybody can do this in a day. But I mean, Hercules did. I don't want to go into that too much. There's a lot of like biblical stories that you can relate that whole thing to. But anyways, whatever. I'm just going to go quickly. I could talk about each of these for a while. I'm not going to do that. All right, Stymphalian birds. He had to go and drive those away. Do y'all remember the Stymphalian birds from before? We've actually talked about them in the... Yeah, very good. This is the same picture that I used there too. All right, this is actually Hercules in that picture. And this is not from the Jason of the Argonaut story. This is from his little 12 trials. So yeah, these are the birds of Ares, and they are really awful. That's really all I got to say about it. I could go into more detail here, but here's another thing. We've got bringing back the Cretan bull, not only just killing it, but bringing back the Cretan bull to the king, Eurystheus, that he's supposed to be obedient to. And yeah, so Diomedes, though, this is where we're going to get a little bit of a connection to Troy. This is what I'm trying to lead us into here. Diomedes is a Trojan man, and if you guys ever take anything from like the economic side of Troy, there are just a couple things that you need to know. One is that Troy taxed heavily, lots of taxes. I guess you could even really say tolls. It's like It's like the Florida of the ancient world. It's like if you come through here, you're going to be paying a lot of money just for going on the road. All right, because remember, Troy is right on the coast of Turkey, going in between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea. The Black Sea is abundant in resources. The Aegean Sea is abundant in resources. So if you have any geographical position between those two, you can just tax people to come in. And then the other thing I don't think I've ever taught you about before is that there's constantly wind coming down from the Black Sea, pushing south, down from the mountains up there and from the sea. So if you're trying to sail up that way, it's so difficult. You have to like really row up north. So by the time you finally hit land up there on the north side, the place that you're most likely going to stay and stop and chill and spend your money is Troy. So Troy was loaded. All right? Do y'all know what the most expensive thing was in the world at that time?
Spice.
No, that is expensive. But the most expensive thing in the world at that time was... No. Horses. All right, so Troy had a ton. They were wealthy enough to have them. They had a bunch of horses. Because basically, what are horses in the ancient world? Cars. What else? What?
Travel.
Yeah, cars, travel. What else? More than that, though.
Like work.
Work. Bro, they can carry anything. You put two horses together, they can carry anything. But think about that. Two horses together, what else could they carry? Chariots, dude. Chariots weren't just like a symbol of like military aggression and like fearful, you know, like how are we ever going to take this thing out? It's like, dude, if you have a chariot, you are like the coolest person in the world. That's like a god thing. Only gods ride chariots. So the Trojans were super well known for their horses. Diomedes is an incredible soldier in Troy. And he had these wild mares. And I'm actually just going to read y'all this section because I like this one. What's up?
I remember, like, didn't he go into, like, a stable or whatever during the Iliad, and he was like, take care of all of my horses, like, I'm bringing them into war tomorrow, and he's, like, describing
Guaranteed.
himself, like,
Guaranteed.
that was probably him.
It might have been him. I'm not sure. But this guy, he is a really, really strong dude who actually became a king in Thrace for a while. His bloodline is tied back to these Trojan ties to horses. So his mares were so strong and so savage that they had to be shackled to their brazen troughs with chains of iron. They did not feed on oats. Any stranger who were so unfortunate as to seek out the city of Diomedes were cast into their mangers that the mares might eat their flesh. So these are human-eating horses. But when Hercules came, his first act was to capture the cruel king, empower the guards in the stables, and serve that king up to his own mares. So after this meal, the creatures finally grew gentle, and he drove them down to the shore of the sea. But the Bistones, meaning the people who had become king of Diomedes' place, they armed and pursued him so that he had to turn back and fight them. And he put the mares in charge of his dearest friend and constant companion, Abderus, the son of Hermes. But with Hercules gone, they were again seized with the lust for human flesh. And when he returned after putting the Bistones to flight, he found that they had torn Abderus limb from limb. Heracles mourned this death deeply, and in his honor founded the city of Abdera. Then he again tamed the mares and brought them safely to Eurystheus, who dedicated the horses to Hera. They then bore young, and their race multiplied throughout the years. It is said that Alexander the Great rode one of their descendants, Bellerophon. Now when Hercules had accomplished this labor, he joined Jason and the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece. But the tale of this expedition has already been told. So, this story for me is just one of the ones that we can talk about for a second. What does that kind of resemble? All of these are stories that you can take, mythologically really fun to read. They can be taken as like economic things that can tell you about certain places, but they also have some pretty deeply rooted lessons in them. I could go through them for a long time, but I just want to talk about this one. This is one that's kind of obvious to me.
It's kind of like the guy in the thing in the well.
Oh, so you're tying it to another Hercules story? Yeah, his little friends, his little companions seem to always get wiped out. Man, that's interesting. Yeah, that's it. You can think about that for a long time. It's like if you're surrounded by greatness, you're surrounded by people who want to do great things. Sometimes you might catch the heat.
Don't stand next to Hercules.
Yeah, don't get in the kitchen if you can't take the heat.
Can I use reference here?
Sure. But what's the lesson? That's a good tie, actually. I didn't think about that one. What's the tie here? Like the lesson that you can tie from this. His job was to go and rein in something that devours people. But what happened? This is like a poem. You can just like break down. What?
It's kind of like he's supposed to be the king because he can like tame all this.
Oh, okay. So he's the only one who can tame. All right. So tamer can be equal to like a king, the one who has authority over that thing.
Even without him, like chaos happened. Kind of.
Oh, okay. So without that, we're gonna have chaos. People are gonna pay. All right, keep going, dude. You guys are doing great. That's awesome. What else? What happens though? He tames them once,
And he leaves.
but he leaves. He has to leave, and then what happens?
He comes back and then.
His companions.
They go wild again. So once you have the tamer and the king around them, chaos doesn't exist. But once this person is not there, chaos comes back. So it's this lesson of like authority. And what's like the image that we get, or like the lesson that we get from wild horses? It's the same thing. I'm bringing up like Proverbs as much as I can. I can do it for every single one. This is a tough one, I know. I'm just kind of tossing y'all into it. I also know that when I'm not like grading anything, it's hard to like focus on like what we're doing. But really what I'm trying to bring up is just the conversation of like the horses represent something that you seem to struggle to control. I'm going like as baseline as that kind of lesson. It's something that you struggle to control. You can't control it yourself. It actually will eat you if you think that you can become the king of that thing. It will devour you. That's what happened to the king who had taken these horses from Diomedes. So, that king was fed, the fake authority was fed to that thing, and then the real authority came in and those horses were tamed. When that authority leaves, something other than you, when that authority leaves, you lose control, there's no control over that thing, and then it will start to devour again. I just think that that's a really interesting lesson. It kind of feeds into the same thing of like you can make the right decision to go along that way, but just because you make the right decision and you decide that you believe something or you know something, that's not going to actually make all of these trials go away.
It's just like, part of me just thinks about how, like, in my mind, it kind of shows like a lacking of like foresight. Because, I mean, he knew how like vicious these horses were.
Yeah.
And he like just leaves his companion alone.
Yeah.
Like, how was something not going to happen?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. You could blame it on Hercules. You could basically say, it's his fault for doing that. But yeah, I don't know. Each of these trials, I can't go through each one. It would just take too long. But each of these trials has something like that, where it's like, what are they trying to? Because these were tales that were told to kids. These were really, really significant stories. And here's another one. This is Hippolytus. All right, so we have. Do I want to talk about this one?
What's a girdle?
It's like a belt. So yeah, I'll do this one just for a second. Just like reading it the way this guy's written it. All right. I don't even think I said the bowl of Crete that he took was the one from Minos, by the way. I don't think I ever said that to you. Yeah, it was the one that birthed the Minotaur, or sired the Minotaur. So I mean, I promise we could talk about all of these for like what's the meaning, geoeconomically and all that kind of stuff. It's like this is Greece asserting itself. Like we have everything. We have not just like the economic dominion. We have the religious, the thoughtful, the pathos. It all resembles pathos. It's crazy. All right, so this is a. I don't think I can do this in enough time. All right, whatever. Let's just do it. Okay, when the hero laid Queen Hippolyte laid the girdle at the feet of Eurystheus, this is what's so interesting. He had basically gotten and Hippolyte is the queen of the Amazons, by the way, and the Amazons are terrifying. So she eventually was beaten by Hercules and gave it up. But when he brought it back to the feet of Eurystheus, the king did not yet allow him to rest from his toils, but sent him immediately to go and do something else. So this is the part for me that when I think about like how many has he done so far? I think he's done
9.
he's done 9 at this point. This was the 9th one at this point. All right. So there are a lot of renditions of this telling and like Hercules' attitude towards this stuff. Some of them, the way that you kind of imagine it just at face value is that Hercules is going to be like, oh, I'm ready for the next one. Let's go. But the best ones are the ones in between that show that like at this point, this is where he starts to have a breakdown. This is where Hercules starts to have a breakdown. Like Eurystheus gives him no time to even come back from this one story, this one tale, and rest. And he starts to, this is where he basically loses it. And he's like, I don't care what happens to me. Like what worse can happen to me at this point? I don't care that I'm doing the right thing. I don't care that I'm obeying what the gods have said. This is just where he drops all concern for any sort of parameters that he had once proven to be good for himself and that other things had proven to be good for himself. It's like all of these things have blessed him with something. Each of these things have given him some way to look at himself differently, look at the gods differently, look at his future differently. But it's so interesting, and I love that the Greek myth has it in there, is that he doesn't want to do this anymore.
Reminds me of our conversation from yesterday.
Well, how?
Like the feeling of getting really stressed and just letting go and feeling like I don't care. Like
Dang, I didn't even
everything's
think about
terrible.
that.
I
Yeah.
don't care. I don't care.
Yeah. And it's true, like we know, like we all know, even if you just take it like academically, you take it like, I don't know, like if you work out and you like have a goal or you like want to get on a team, you like want to, I don't know. Like that there are things that you can do to like get to that point. But there are breakdown moments where we like stop working for it, we like stop desiring for it completely. And this is his for Hercules. It's the only spot really in the telling where there's a moment like this for him. And what I think is so interesting is that he knows he's close to his end. He knows that there are only 12. He even knows what the 12 are. But this is why I like this part. He breaks down, and then the next one is something that he knows how to do. So he keeps pushing, and he goes, and then he goes into this 10th one, and he's like, I know how to do this. And I'm not going to go into the details of the story. Sorry for not giving y'all fun tales. Maybe I will later. I just want to make sure we get through this. He does accomplish this one, another cattle-based, another agriculture-based problem, and his confidence in it and his patience with the people of the town that he does this with is wild. Just he when you read the full retelling of these tales, you just have this this wild sense of wisdom from Hercules in this part. After he pushes through this wave of doubt, anger, resentment, just not wanting to be on this walk anymore, and then he's able to take care of that one. And then this is a really famous one as well. I can't go into this one either. But he gets the golden apples of the Hesperides, and I just need you guys to know a lot of the images, a lot of the people that you have in the Hercules story are going to show up again in the Iliad, and the golden apple is what we're going to talk about. I guess I could even give you guys just a little preview into where this is going next week. But
Guarded by, is it Iron?
yeah. No, different names. But this is the third and most famous thing that he does. This is towards the end. But this is what kind of deems him an epic hero. All epic heroes make some sort of journey to the underworld. All right, and this is the one that proves to Eurystheus that he is truly as amazing as he thinks himself to be. But he also did all these things to help the king, and sometimes the king wasn't even really grateful. That was the other thing right there I should have said between 9 and 10 is like he brought that stuff back. He had accomplished all that stuff for the king, and the king wasn't grateful for what he got. And so the resentment of Hercules just grew and grew and grew and grew. And resentment is a killer, man. Resentment is brutal. But this is like the hardest thing ever. And he goes and he walks up Cerberus, who is the three-headed dog from Harry Potter, yada yada. And this is so funny, just terrible art. His fur is supposed to be snakes. So like he has 3 heads, but his hairs are, he's so big that his hairs aren't hair. His hairs are snakes. It's so funny, dude. And the other funny thing is that the way that Eurystheus shows that he is so intimidated by Hercules not giving up is he hides in a huge jar, and I just think it's the funniest thing ever. So, anyways, that is where like the really famous and big stories of Hercules end. The 12 labors of Hercules, you kind of have them just face value right here, but he does have a bunch of other further adventures, and I don't really want to go into that right now. But really, this is where him being single. This is when he meets Danae. So this is where Ovid picks up. Is he's already done all of these things. He's already proven himself to be a hero. But remember, Ovid does not want to write about that kind of stuff. He wants to write about love. And so he meets Danae. He has all that stuff with Nessus. The blood of Nessus gets soaked into the cloak that he gives to Danae and says, use this. This is what Nessus says and lies to him. He says, use this if you ever, feel like your husband doesn't love you anymore. You can just give him this cloak. It's been blessed by the gods to unite spouse back to spouse if your love starts to fade away. And so, what? He shot him with the arrow that he had dipped into and so his blood was soaked in that venom. And so, eventually years do go by, and a girl named Iola, you remember me talking about that maybe for a second? Yeah. A girl named Iola, I-O-L-E, she comes into town and catches the eye of Hercules, but he doesn't actually feed into the lust that we've seen so often. And this is why I like that. And of course it fits that Ovid would do this kind of story. He doesn't give in to the lust. And one of the ways that the story talks to the audience about it is basically saying the trials that he's gone before have trained him to be in control of himself. And so Danae expects him to be like other men. And, after a long life of having done the right thing or going through really difficult things, she expects that he does actually, he's bored of her, of Danae. She starts to have this sort of insecure kind of moment. And she's like, well, no way she doesn't like Iola, look at her. And so this is when she's like, oh, but that cloak that Nessus gave me years ago, I can just give that to Hercules and he'll love me again. And Nessus, being a centaur, that's a whole nature thing. He's just evil at his core. It was a trick, and so when he put it on, I told you all this, didn't I, already? He put it on, and it was crazy. It started to chew up his flesh. He couldn't pull it off. Yeah, anytime he tried to pull it off, it would just pull his skin off with him. And so it's like chewing him down to nothing. It's like chewing him down to the bones in his back and in his shoulders. And it's just a wild image, dude. What does that resemble? If you take that at a deep level, what is the shirt of Nessus? What's in the shirt of Nessus? What was true about that whole scenario? And what's now going to happen to Hercules? There's just so many things that you could answer within that. So I'll just say because Bella's going to read here in a minute. In a way, with all of his trials and all of his suffering, he's bearing them all. Because really, it was the blood of the Hydra, one of his first trials that he ever did, that was actually soaked into his arrows that he was really proud of, that made him go off and be able to do amazing things. But it's now in the cloak that he's wearing, and it's killing him. So you could take that and you could talk about that for a while. You could talk about the whole thing about how he never actually was going to cheat on his wife. It's just the fear of a husband not being faithful, a fear of a father not being true, that is one of the most haunting things in all of our lives. And it is the thing that actually does chew away at the image of Hercules, literally chewing away his skin and his muscles, the things that made him strong in his bones. And then the end is him, the last thing he's doing, the very end of Hercules' story, the very last thing he does is he builds a pyre for himself. And so the last thing he does is he goes through a funeral ritual for himself. And then he dies. But then his soul goes to the underworld. And he talks to Hades for a bit. And then where does he go? He goes to heaven, dude. Because he becomes a god. So it's just great. Like the whole story is just like this wild, it just feels like, like a little kid's story. But it's this really, really deep image of a true hero who's both God and both man all at the same time. All right.